The National Cathedral, it was supposed to be that one symbol that united all religions, all Ghanaians, regardless of which tribe or religion you belong to. But in the last few weeks, it's turning out to be the very opposite of that. If for anything, it's rather dividing than uniting because of key questions of transparency and accountability. And so, if you're building God's house, you build it on the altar of transparency and accountability or without transparency or accountability. There are many who will say, what is happening currently amounts to building God's house without transparency and accountability. But the question really tonight to ask is, this is what it should be, building it with transparency and accountability. And we've heard a lot in the last few weeks, revelations from Okudzeto Ablakwa, leaked documents, finance minister speaking, the secretariat speaking. Of course now, we're learning of a resignation, a high-profile resignation from the Board of Trustees of the National Cathedral Project. And so let's get into this. I want to speak to the clergy. I want to speak to the members of the Christian fraternity, the leadership of the Christian fraternity. I wonder what they make of all this. This was supposed to be the thing that they rally around in building God's house. Do they still feel as attached to this? Do they also want the same transparency and accountability? Are they asking themselves the same questions? We'll get into that when we speak to my guests who are joining me. So we now know this was supposed to be, at the time it was first mooted in 2017, it was supposed to be $100 million. The whole project was supposed to cost that. When the finance minister updated us over the weekend when he spoke on GTV's Talking Point, he gave a figure, which is 350 million cedi. That's what it's going to cost to build a national cathedral. That is equivalent to 2.8 billion cedi. So that's a significant amount of money. And the fundamental question that has been asked when you consider this amount, at a time when the economy is in crisis, should this be a priority? If you ever go to the IMF, the last time we went to the IMF, we went to the IMF for a little under $1 billion. Just over $900 million we went for. And if you think about it, 350 million, it's almost a quarter of that. So this is a significant amount of money that will do a lot for this economy that is in crisis, right? The government is looking for money and looking to borrow and struggling to raise enough, even domestically, to shore up the city. They're struggling to raise this even when it comes to the borrowing on the local market, right? They're trying to raise some 750 million cedis on the domestic. So this is a lot of money to spend for a poor country in the midst of an economic crisis, struggling on a daily basis to meet its basic needs at that level. So that's why the questions are being asked, and rightly so. Whether considering where we are as a country, if you dreamed this up in 2017 when the economy was rebounding, doing well, yeah, it's okay. But considering that times have changed and this crisis we are in is going to linger for so long, for years to come, and maybe only tapering off after 2015, 2025, it may even get worse. Is this the most prudent use of the resources now at this time? Or should we pause and rechannel these resources into stabilizing the economy? If you pump this money right now into the system, it will go a long way to try and stabilize the city, which is depreciating, right? So those are the fundamental questions that have been asked on the back of the revelation of the cost of the National Cathedral. And so the key question then had become, so how is government going to fund this? And I make that point knowing that at the beginning, the assurances were, well, government was going to play a very minimal role in this, and the clergy, the Christian community, was going to take the bulk of the load when it comes to funding. But in 2019, the finance minister went to the cabinet and made a point. He told Ghanaians that the state will be facilitating this process by providing land, the secretariat, seed money for the preparatory phase. So that is the parameters, the explicit confines within which the government was going to operate. Land, secretariat, seed money for preparatory phase. As we know now, based on documents that have been leaked so far, and the finance ministry has defended it, an estimated 200 million has been released. So you could say that that is a seed money that went to, because we've already given out the land and the secretary has been established. But the question that I'm being asked is, so what is the limit? When they say seed money, what is the limit? If it's 200 million cedis now, is that it? Or we intend to release more? That is a key question that we are asking tonight, and many have asked. So let's have clarity. Let's have some transparency in the release of the funds. And the key question, did Parliament explicitly approve this? Of course, this was in the budget, but did the Finance Ministry go to Parliament to say, yes, we want to provide seed money, but we want to provide X amount of seed money, and then Parliament approved it? That's the question that I've been asked. The Finance Minister says, this in the budget is enough, because you approve the concept in the budget. Once you approve the concept, then of course, you're giving me the free hand to spend, which is exactly what they're doing. But the question's there. And this quote in that budget has also come into play now, because the Finance Minister expressed the President's determination that the building of the National Cathedral will not put, quote, undue financial burdens on the state. That is the operative phrase is undue financial burden. Question is, land, secretariat, 200 million. By the way, the 200 million is all, that's what we know, because that's what the leaked documents suggest or say. What else don't we know? How much more has gone that we're not told? Because until the leaks happened, we didn't know that as much as 200 million had been spent. So there's a fundamental question to be asked. How much have we spent to date? And does it meet the President's own criteria of not placing undue financial burden? So if it's 200 million, is that undue financial burden or is it not? It's a key question that we need to ask, because they've indicated that they're going to do this, and they're going to do this to ensure that it does not place undue financial burden on the state. And in there is the admission that the state is determined not to carry the full load, not to carry the bulk of the burden, but the majority of it will go to others, private sector contributions and contribution from the churches. Okay. Now, and again, in that budget, still budget, he has therefore proposed a partnership. So that's how they're going to do this. A partnership between the state and the Ghanaian Christian community, both at home and the diaspora. A partnership. Tonight we're going to explore that partnership, right? Is this partnership still working? Because someone said, if this partnership was still working, then the state will not have to do a lot. And the Finance Minister will not be justifying why it's okay to spend so much of the taxpayers' money on this. So is there a problem with this partnership between the state and the Ghanaian Christian community? So I'm talking to the leaders of the Christian community. They are on my show tonight. We'll explore this in a bit more when they join. What is the partnership like? What fruits have the partnership yielded in building the National Cathedral? We'll come to that question when they join us. And so let's break down the funds as have been released so far from the leaked document. So one of the key documents that, again, Samokudu Tablako had leaked was 25 billion that had been released. I've talked about that earlier. And he had raised a few other additional questions. That the project has now stalled, and indeed we've seen letters from the project managers laying off workers, the casual workers, the laborers who are actually doing the actual work of building. They've been laid off. And in that letter we've seen, and Samokudu Tablako, the ranking on the Foreign Affairs Committee leaked, in that letter the project managers say because of funds, they haven't been given enough funds, and so they have to let. So this has happened in March. So since March, it appears the project has stalled. Why? Is it because this partnership may be not working as it should? We'll ask that question. And then he says contractors haven't been paid, because one of the contractors had, of course, complained. Owners of the demolished properties have also not been compensated. But we know tonight that one of the owners of the private property that got affected, had to be demolished to make way for the National Cathedral, had been given a 1.26 acre plot in the same Ridge residential area as replacement for what they lost in that same vicinity. Now, Samokudu Tablako tells me tonight on Top Story, on radio, that that company in question has not been able to occupy and take possession of that property because there's controversy. And it's been 2 years since they were given access to that land, and there are issues that they're fighting with some government elements on there. That's an allegation that is made on as far as this is concerned. Now, this is the case of Waterstone Realty Limited, and they were asking for a compensation of $6.5 million for what had happened to them when their properties were affected by this. The company has served the government a notice since the 4th of November 2021 about their intent to proceed to court because they've been given the right to access the land to replace, but they can't access it now 2 years on because of all the issues that have cropped up. And then we dug into this debate. So trying to understand the funding model that was to back the construction from the onset. And Dr. Kwabena Opuni-Frimpong in 2017 was the General Secretary of the Christian Council at the time the concept of the National Cathedral was first conceived. And he said something very instructive to us recently, as last week. He says, our understanding of this National Cathedral have had a conversation with the Minister for Chieftaincy and Religious Affairs, Kofi Jamesi, and my understanding is that it is the churches that are going to build this National Cathedral. It was clear to us that at the early stages in 2017, that's what they were told. They were told by the Chieftaincy Minister very specifically that the churches were going to build it. Okay, so he's a bit surprised that government appears to be taking the lead role now. So that's him at that time in his point. And then he goes on to make a point, and a very important point, in the wake of all the controversy, challenging the trustees to come forward and offer some clarity. Because many of the trustees are his colleagues, members of the clergy, like leaders of the Christian community. He challenged them, come forward and offer some clarity. Because if you're building God's house and there's all this controversy, almost bordering on a scandal, you really don't want that associated with building of a God's house. And he was challenging them to do so. Now, however, on the back of this, then we hear this week that one of the most prominent members of the Board of Trustees for the National Cathedral, Dr. Mensah Otabil, who is a general overseer of the International Central Gospel Church, has himself resigned, as far back from what I understand, a year ago from the Board of Trustees of the National Cathedral. That raised a lot of questions. It raised a lot of questions. And the question fundamentally goes to, and listen, in the last 24 hours, before the last 24 hours, although he's resigned, his picture and image and name were still on the National Cathedral website as a trustee. Following the controversy in the last few days that he's resigned, we know there's pressure had been brought to bear, and the Secretariat for the National Cathedral have been forced to pull down his image and name from the page. You need to ask the question, what really spooked Dr. Mensah Otabil to the point where he had to resign from the trustees, from the Board of Trustees? What spooked him so badly that he needed to resign? What was it? We don't know, right? But what was it that spooked him that he had to resign from the board? To the point that he didn't only resign, they had to make sure that his image and name had nothing to do with the building of the cathedral anymore. There's a lot of questions. There are a lot of questions there that his resignation and the subsequent pulling down of his image and name raises. And it comes down to what spooked him. Did anything spook him? What was it that got him to resign? Such a prominent, high-profile, most respected members of the clergy. So, but there are few members of the clergy who still remain as trustees. There were 13 of them. 12 still remain, right? And if you go to the website of the National Cathedral, until 24 hours ago, in fact, overnight, that's when Pastor Mensah Otabil's name was removed, right? If you went there yesterday in the afternoon, you will find Mensah Otabil's name and picture there, but that has been removed now. So these men of God remain there. We have the Apostle Professor Pokunyina, chairman of the Church of Pentecost, there as the chairperson. You have the vice chair, that's Bishop Charles Palmer Buckle, Metropolitan Catholic Archbishop Cape Coast, there. You have Most Reverend Bishop Justice Ofeya Krofi, Anglican Bishop Emeritus member. He's a member of the trustees. You have Reverend Professor Imam Mate, former moderator of the Presbyterian Church. He's still a member of the Board of Trustees for the National Cathedral. Then you have Most Reverend T.K. Awoche Pratt. He's the presiding bishop of the Methodist Church. He's a member. You have Reverend Professor Cephas Amenyo. He's a moderator of the Presbyterian Church, a member. Archbishop Nicholas Duncan Williams, President, Archbishop and General Overseer of the Action Chapel International, a member. You have Reverend Dr. Joyce Ayi, Executive Director, Salt and Light Ministries, a member of the trustees, still there. We have Bishop Dakiwad Mills, Presiding Bishop, Lighthouse Group of Churches, a member. Reverend Eastwood Anaba, Founding and President of the Eastwood Anaba Ministries, a member, still there. Reverend Victor Kusi Boateng, Founder of the Power Chapel Worldwide. He's a member and secretary to the trustees. And Reverend Dr. Frimpong Manso, General Superintendent, Assemblies of God member, still as a member of the trustees. So although Dr. Mensah Otabil is gone, these men of God, clergymen, still remain on the trustees. Now, a few things we've learned tonight, trying to pick up a few of the details from those close to the trustees who still remain. They feel deeply saddened by the controversy happening. Some of them believe that the politics that has been brought into this, the politicization of the National Cathedral, is destroying this country. But they also acknowledge that their reputations are at stake. And so what we understand is that they will be issuing a statement. They want to collectively come together, gather all the facts, and issue a statement that will clarify some of the issues, in fact, all the issues. And that is why they haven't spoken yet from amongst those who remain. And some have suggested that some of them may be considering to pull away from the trustees as well, like Mensah Otabil had done. We don't have information on that, but what we can tell you is that they feel, they know, they've heard what is happening, they are concerned about it, and they're preparing to come out in a statement that will clarify the issues on this. So that's where we are with the National Cathedral and what we know. So the conversation we must have is, how do you build God's house and ensure that in doing so, there is transparency and there is accountability? We're speaking to the men of God who are joining me right now for that conversation, some of the leaders of the Christian fraternity. Remember, there's supposed to be a partnership between state and the Christian community for this to happen. Let's hear from the Christian community, the leaders of the Christian community, on the back of everything that's happened. After the break, we'll hear them. Stay with me.